Timely fertilization of lawns is very important, especially in keeping them green and growing. And here we are in our fruit orchard with our fescue, and it's the month of March, and that's the first time that we need to put on an application of fertilizer. Now, really with cool season grasses such as fescue and Kentucky bluegrass and maybe ryegrass, there are really a couple of programs that you can choose, a high maintenance or a low maintenance. A high maintenance program would be putting on 4 applications of fertilizer a year. The first one being in March, then May, September, and November. With those 4 applications, two of those months, the months of March and September, you would put on a complete fertilizer, which would be one that would contain nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. The other 2 months would strictly be a nitrogen source, so it'd be the first number in zeros and the second 2 numbers. Now here at our studio gardens, we go on a low maintenance program, which is 3 applications of fertilizer a month, and that's the first one in March, then in June, and then in September. And what we've done, like we always recommend you, is take a soil test first of all. We were really in good shape with our phosphorus and right on the border with our potassium, but obviously we need some nitrogen. So we chose a 3:1:2 ratio or a 4:1:2 ratio, as close as we could get, with a slow release nitrogen that we've talked about as well. And we'll put that fertilizer on in March and then again in September, and our June application will be strictly nitrogen. Now, we have chose 2 different fertilizers here. One is 31:3:10 and this one is 31:3:10, but I just want to show you the differences in the same numbers but a different percentage of slow release nitrogen. This one has 10% slow release nitrogen and this product has 6.7. Both of those are very good, but again, read on the label and see if it says controlled release, water insoluble, or slow release, because that keeps the nitrogen from leaching into the water table and it keeps it releasing over a longer period of time. Now you might ask, how do you know how much to put on? Well, the standard rule is 1 pound of actual nitrogen per 1,000 square feet. Well, actual nitrogen would be 100%. If you notice here, we only have 31% nitrogen, so there's a real simple formula to figure that out. And basically what you do is you take your 1 pound and you divide it by your number in your nitrogen. In this case, we'll be dividing it by 1 divided by 0.31, which is our percentage of nitrogen in this fertilizer, and we'll come up with about 3.2 pounds per 1,000 square feet, and we just round it off to 3 pounds. So we'll need to put on 3 pounds of this fertilizer per 1,000 square feet. Well, to figure out how much fertilizer we need to buy, we have about 15,000 square feet of fescue here. And so with 15,000 square feet and 3 pounds at 1,000, we're going to need about 45 pounds of fertilizer. So we'll use just basically a 15-pound bag. Now, the fertilizer, again, I'd like to show you, this one has different colors. The green is actually the nitrogen, and it's encapsulated to make it release over a longer period of time. And again, we can't emphasize that importance enough. Now, of course, these slow release are going to cost us a little bit more, but it keeps our lawn greener over a longer period of time. Now, the other problem that we're faced with is how to put it out with our spreaders. And let me walk over here and talk about the 2 different types that we have. This particular fertilizer spreader is a drop type spreader. It means that it just drops it at the bottom in that width. Now, you really have to be careful on this one, because if you're not good aim, you'll actually leave spaces between, and that can cause problems in the green up of your lawn. This is a good type fertilizer spreader to use, especially if you choose to use a weed and feed product, because the rotary type spreads it usually in a larger area, and you're liable to throw it into a weed bed or a flower bed or a shrub bed, and you'll get some herbicide damage in there. And while we're talking about weed and feeds, let me remind you that really we recommend that you put on separate applications, because the weed and feed usually, especially in Bermuda lawns, if you put that out now, which you need to do for the pre-emergence of the crabgrass, the Bermuda is dormant. So really, essentially, you're fertilizing the weeds until that herbicide kicks in to get the germinating ones. The weeds that are already established, it really won't control them. You're just going to feed those. So it's really better to do it in two separate applications. Put on your herbicide first, then your fertilizer when the grass is starting to green up and grow. Now obviously the two were combined to save you time in putting on only one application. And it makes sense. It just doesn't really pan out with the timing of our season and the way the grasses grow here in Oklahoma. Now on the rotary spreader, the one that I was using to put out, again, it gives you a bigger area to broadcast, and because we have 15,000 square feet, this is the one that we choose to use. However, it doesn't always put out the application evenly. So there's one way that you can check how your spreaders are putting out applications, as well as knowing exactly how much they're putting out. Now, a lot of the bags of fertilizer will tell you which setting to use for the particular type of spreader. But a good way to check that is to calibrate it. And the best way is to find a sidewalk or some pavement, mark off an area that's about 20 by 50 or 10 by 100, which would equal 1,000 square feet. If you don't have that much cement, you can multiply a 10 by 10 area and then just multiply it by 10 to get your 1,000 square feet. But what you would do is weigh out a pre-amount or measured amount of fertilizer. Put that in your spreader. Then walk at the normal pace that you would, set it at the setting that you think it's supposedly right, put out that amount in the area. What you have left, then weigh it and subtract it from your first number, and that will give you the amount that it put out per 1,000 square feet. Another way that you could do it is just do the same thing, but sweep up the amount that you put on the sidewalk and then weigh that, and again, that would tell you how much you put out per 1,000 square feet. If it's not set right and you need to change it, remember the smaller numbers on the setting put out less amounts of fertilizer. Obviously, after you've done that on the sidewalk, you want to sweep that off, wash off your sidewalk so you don't get any kind of erosion. And then once you've got your setter calibrated, or your spreader calibrated, go ahead and put out the fertilizer. But another thing to remember is go two different ways when you're putting it out. Put out half of that amount, say from north to south, and then come back and put the other half in and apply it from east to west. So you're doing a crisscross pattern, and that way you'll get better coverage and you can overlap, and you'll still be putting out the appropriate amount, but you won't leave any spots that will green up and make the lawn look a little bit funny. And of course, with any of your fertilizers, you want to make sure that you water it in, especially the slow release, because it takes the water to activate it to make it release. And during the dry spells, you'll need to keep watering it so it will release as it's supposed to.
We hope you've enjoyed this classic from the Oklahoma Gardening Vault. Remember, even though these tips and techniques are timeless, there's always something new to learn in the world of gardening. By subscribing to both Oklahoma Gardening and OK Gardening Classics, you'll have access to a wealth of gardening knowledge, both classic and contemporary.